Not the soft, ethereal sheen of moonlight on a fresh snowfall, but a vibrant, almost violent luminescence that clung to the girls like a second skin. It shimmered on their fingertips when they smoothed their hair, dusted their eyelashes with impossible starlight, and left trails on the pillows where they rested their heads. They thought it was a playful magic, a perk of the job, a secret they shared with the darkness. They were the most fashionable, most envied young women in town, the elite workers of the United States Radium Corporation in Orange, New Jersey. And they were painting the future, one tiny watch dial at a time. Their tool was a fine-tipped camel hair brush. Their paint was undark, a proprietary glowing mixture containing pure, pulverized radium. They were told it was safe. They were told it was a miracle, cure for everything from rheumatism to impotence. They were even shown a jar of the powder and encouraged to play with it. It's harmless, the floor managers would say, like sunlight. For the perfect, needle-sharp point, their technique drilled into them for speed and precision was called lip pointing. Dip the brush, use the lips to draw the bristles into a fine tip, paint the tiny numeral, and repeat. They did this hundreds of times a day, each dip delivering a microscopic dose of the deadliest substance known to science directly into their bodies. They were paid well, they were proud, and they were, with every kiss of the brush to their lips, sealing a terrifying, invisible fate. The year was 1917, and the girls who would later be known across the country simply as the Radium Girls were not just painting watch dials, they were painting their own epitaphs in glowing green. Their story is not just one of corporate negligence, it is the genesis of modern health physics, a landmark legal battle, and a terrifying prologue to the secrets of the atom that would ultimately decide World War II. It is the story of how 5 young women from New Jersey fought the entire machinery of American industry and science, and in doing so, laid the foundation for every single safety regulation that protects every American worker today. It is the story of the girls who glowed and the unseen power that devoured them. Part I, The American Dream. Phosphorescent, C. 1917 to 1923. Chapter 1. The Factory of Starlight. Asterisk. The context of World War I. The demand for luminous dials for military watches and instrument panels. The founding of the U.S. Radium Corporation, originally the Radium Luminous Material Corporation. Asterisk. The setting. Orange, New Jersey. The factory has a desirable workplace for young women, high pay, clean work, patriotic duty. Asterisk. The Radium Dial Painters. Profiles of the early painters, Grace Fryer, Edna Hussman, Quinta MacDonald, and the subsequent key figures, their youth, aspirations, and the social culture of the plant. Chapter 2. The Miracle Element. Asterisk. A deep dive into radium, its discovery by the Curies, the initial scientific excitement, and its status as a high-priced medical cure-all in the 1,910 seconds. The culture of radium consumption, water, toothpaste, cosmetics. Asterisk. Undark. The composition and the crucial decision by management to prioritize output over safety. The chemists and managers wore protective gear. The girls did not. The explicit instructions to lip point for speed. Asterisk. The innocent symptoms, toothaches, fatigue, and minor ailments dismissed as common illness. The radioactive pranks, painting teeth, nails, and clothes to glow. Chapter 3. The Slow Poison. Asterisk. The first deaths, early victims who began to suffer excruciating symptoms, severe anemia, necrotic jaw tissue. Doctors misdiagnosed the cause as syphilis, leading to shame and social ruin for the victims. Asterisk. The mechanism of the poison, radium's chemical similarity to calcium. When ingested, it deposits directly into the bone marrow, emitting alpha particles that destroy the bone and surrounding tissue from the inside out. The girls were, scientifically, internally decaying. Asterisk. The first cover-up. U.S. Radium dismisses the sicknesses as unrelated, uses company doctors to issue false reports, and fights initial compensation claims leveraging the social stigma of the syphilis diagnosis. Part 2. The Battle for a Body. C. 1924 to 1928. Chapter 4. The Unmasking Doctor. Asterisk. Enter Dr. Harrison Martland, the medical examiner of Essex County. His skepticism of the syphilis diagnoses and his commitment to forensic truth. Asterisk. Martland's breakthrough. Using an early Geiger counter and spectral analysis to detect residual radiation in the victims' bodies and their breath, the radium breath. His realization that the women were radioactive, not infected. Asterisk. The shocking discovery: the bones of the deceased victims were still highly radioactive. Years later, Martland's evidence is irrefutable. The cause of death is occupational radium poisoning. Chapter 5. Grace Fryer's Fight. Asterisk. The emergence of Grace Fryer as the lead plaintiff, her years of agonizing illness, and her refusal to settle quietly, the sheer difficulty of finding a lawyer willing to take on the powerful U.S. Radium Corporation. Asterisk. Raymond Berry, the lawyer who finally takes the case. The uphill battle of proving an invisible, delayed injury in a time when occupational disease was not recognized by law. Asterisk. The legal delay tactics. U.S. Radium exploits the slow pace of the court system, knowing the women are dying, hoping the problem will literally disappear. The case is adjourned repeatedly as the victims grow weaker. Chapter 6. A Public Reckoning. Asterisk. The media storm. Newspapers across the U.S. pick up the story. The narrative of the young, patriotic, glowing girls being betrayed by a heartless corporation captures the public's imagination. Asterisk. The trial. Testimony from the women, frail and barely able to speak, against the dismissive, clinical testimony of the company experts. The horrifying details of their decomposing jaws and disintegrating spine. Asterisk. The settlement and the precedent. The eventual, dramatic settlement. While modest by modern standards, it set a monumental legal precedent, establishing the right of workers to sue employers for occupational disease and poisoning. The birth of industrial safety as a legal concept. Part 3. The Ghostly Legacy and the Atomic Shadow. 1929 to 1945. Chapter 7. The Unstoppable Science. Asterisk. The post-trial landscape. New safety standards are grudgingly adopted, but the use of radium continues in other applications. The U.S. government begins to track the survivors and their health, albeit minimally. Asterisk. The American obsession with self-improvement and health in the 1930 seconds, a counter-narrative to the Radium Girls story. The tragedy of Eben Byers, the Pittsburgh playboy who died from drinking Radithor, radium water. A case that finally forced the FDA to crack down on radioactive patent medicines. Asterisk. The long, slow demise of the survivors. The scientific community continues to study the victims, realizing they hold the key to understanding the long-term biological effects of radiation. Chapter 8. The Manhattan Project's Unseen Debt. Asterisk. The dawn of the atomic age, World War II, and the desperate, secret race to build the atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project. Asterisk. The vital data. When the bomb effort began, scientists needed to know one thing: how much radiation exposure would kill a human being. The only existing, definitive data came directly from the medical records and autopsies of the Radium Girls and the Watchdial workers. Asterisk. The ethical compromise. The Manhattan Project secretly utilized and relied on the Radium Girls' suffering to set safety limits for its own workers, handling uranium, plutonium, etc., often without acknowledging the source of the data or seeking consent. Chapter 9. The Radium Standard. Asterisk. The role of the U.S. Public Health Service, USPHS, and the establishment of the Radium Registry. The government's ethical tightrope walk, needing to study the dying women for the sake of future atomic workers, but struggling with how to treat and compensate them. Asterisk. The creation of the maximum permissible exposure limit, the earliest precursor to modern radiation safety standards, was directly calculated from the ingested doses of the Radium Girls. Their pain became the official scientific standard for human safety in the atomic age. Part IV. The Permanent Marker. The Modern Era. Chapter 10. The Unending Half-Life. Asterisk. The Final Girls. The story of the last survivors. Their bodies, even decades after exposure, were still measurable sources of radiation. Asterisk. The Legacy. How the Radium Girls case influenced Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, by normalizing the idea of class action lawsuits, creating a pathway for mass injury claims. Asterisk. The cemeteries. The final, eerie resting places of the victims. Their remains were often buried in lead-lined coffins to contain the lingering radiation, a permanent monument to a secret industrial crime. Chapter 11. The Ghosts of Orange. Asterisk. The Modern Era of Health Physics. The girls' suffering is now standard curriculum for radiation safety technicians worldwide. Their story lives on as the most potent cautionary tale in industrial medicine. Asterisk. The Closing Reflection. The girls' glow faded long ago, but their legacy, a hard-won system of worker protection and corporate accountability, still shines on every factory floor, every hospital, and every nuclear facility in America. They died for the dream of a safe workplace, a battle they won decades after their bodies were consumed by starlight. The Factory of Starlight. The United States was gearing up for war. It was 1917, and the Great War across the Atlantic demanded unprecedented industrial mobilization. In Orange, New Jersey, a small but burgeoning city, a particular kind of factory was booming. The United States Radium Corporation, USRC, originally known as the Radium Luminous Material Corporation. This plant wasn't forging steel or building ships. It was creating a material that promised to conquer the night: Undark. Undark was the company's brand name for its unique self-luminous paint. It was a mixture of adhesive, zinc sulfide, the material that actually glows, and a trace amount of radium, the powerful, newly discovered element that acted as the energizer. It was radium's ceaseless, invisible decay that struck the zinc sulfide crystals, causing them to emit that desirable, steady green light. The war machine needed this light everywhere, on the dials of airplane altimeters, on compasses, and most critically, on the faces of wristwatches worn by infantry officers and sailors. The demand for these luminous timepieces made the USRC factory a local gold mine. The elite workforce working at the USRC was considered a coveted job for young women in the area. It paid exceptionally well, often 3 times what a typical factory or clerical job offered. A good dial painter could earn around $20 a week, a princely sum that allowed these working-class girls to buy the latest fashions, contribute significantly to their families, and enjoy a vibrant social life. The work environment was clean, brightly lit, ironically, given their product, and socially stimulating. The workforce was almost exclusively female, composed of young women often straight out of high school or still in their teens. They were friends, sisters, and neighbors, attracted by the independence and respect the job conferred. Among them was Grace Fryer, a quiet, determined young woman who started working there at the age of 18. There was also the lively Quinta McDonald and the sisters Irene Rudolph and Esther Egan. They were patriotic, precise, and utterly dedicated to the meticulous task of painting the tiny numbers and minute marks onto watch faces. The physical act of painting was microscopic. The numerals on a watch dial were minute, and the glow had to be uniform. To achieve the necessary precision, the girls were equipped with fine-tipped camel hair brushes. The kiss of death, lip pointing, The company mandated a technique that would become the central, tragic piece of evidence in their later fight: lip pointing. The instruction was simple and deadly. After dipping the brush into the luminous undark mixture, the girls were trained to smooth the bristles into a needle-sharp point. The fastest and most efficient way to do this, according to the supervisors, was to draw the brush between the lips. Is greater than lip, dip, paint was the constant, rhythmic mantra on the factory floor. They were told, repeatedly, that the material was completely safe. The managers pointed out that the chemists handling the raw materials wore lead aprons and face masks, but explained that this was only because the raw radium powder was 100 times stronger. Once mixed into paint, they insisted it was benign. Furthermore, radium was a highly touted tonic in the period, advertised to cure everything from arthritis to colds. So the girls followed orders. Hundreds of times a day, they tipped their lips with the paint, ingesting microscopic, yet devastating, amounts of radium with every brush. They were swallowing the future, and it glowed, the glittering secret. The most shocking part of this early era was the glow itself. When they left the factory at night, the radium dust coated their clothes, their hair, and their skin. They didn't see this as a health risk. They saw it as a glamorous party trick. They would walk into the movies, glowing faintly in the dark theater, drawing admiring stares. They would paint their teeth with undark before a date to give their smile a brilliant flash. Some even painted their fingernails for an early, radioactive form of nail polish. They were the shining girls, walking advertisements for the miraculous new element. What they didn't know was that the radium, once inside their bodies, was chemically mimicking calcium. Their skeletal system, the very framework of their lives, welcomed the radium, integrating it into the bone structure, especially the joints and the jaw. Once deposited, the radium, with a half-life of 1,600 years, began its ceaseless internal bombardment. The factory was thriving, the girls were paid well, and they were happy. The invisible killer was already at work, slowly replacing their bone marrow with undark that would never dim. The American dream, for the Radium Girls, had a terrifying phosphorescent sheen. Chapter 2. The Miracle Element and the Slow Poison. The tragedy of the Radium Girls is rooted deeply in the early, naive, public and scientific perception of radioactivity, radium mania. Radium had been the global sensation of the century. Discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie in 1898, it was hailed as the most powerful and mysterious element known to science. It was hundreds of thousands of times more radioactive than uranium, and its spontaneous energy emission defied all existing laws of physics. In the 1,910 seconds and 1,920 seconds, radium was wildly embraced by the medical and commercial worlds. Doctors saw its power to destroy cells as a potent weapon against cancer, leading to the birth of radiation therapy. More dangerously, entrepreneurs marketed it as a panacea, a source of eternal, life-giving energy. Radium-infused water was sold as a vitalizing health drink. Radium ointments promised youthful skin. Radium suppositories were sold to treat impotence. The USRC managers were able to assure the girls the paint was safe because, to many in America, radium was not a poison. It was a health tonic. This widespread belief provided the perfect cover for the company's negligence. The first signs of internal decay. By 1922, the first of the dial painters, now former employees, began to develop bizarre and terrifying symptoms. These were not the common factory ailments of lung dust or repetitive strain. These were systemic breakdowns. The initial signs were often dental, severe, persistent toothaches, swelling and bleeding of the gums, mouth lesions that refused to heal. When the girls visited dentists, the treatment was typically extraction. But in these cases, the dental work didn't help. It triggered something far worse. The sockets of the extracted teeth would become infected, and necrotic, the bone tissue literally died and crumbled away. One victim, Molly Maggia, suffered agonizing pain. Her dentist removed several teeth, but the infection spread. Pieces of her jawbone had to be removed surgically. Eventually, her entire lower jaw and then large parts of her upper jaw disintegrated. She died in 1922, officially from syphilis, a devastating and utterly false diagnosis that allowed the company to dismiss her death as unrelated to her work. The mechanism of the poison, the horrifying truth, unknown at the time, was the internal effect of the ingested radium. Asterisk chemical mimicry. Radium, left, 226. Text, Ra, right. Acts like calcium, left, text, Sia. When swallowed, the body's natural metabolic processes deposited it directly into the bone matrix. Asterisk. Internal bombardment. Once in the bone, the radium began to decay, emitting powerful alpha particles. Unlike external radiation, which is often shielded by the skin, this internal radiation had nowhere to go. Asterisk. The bone destroyer. The alpha particles hammered the surrounding bone marrow, where blood is made, causing crippling anemia and destroying the bone itself. The girls weren't merely sick, their skeletal systems were literally decomposing from the inside out, fueled by the endless energy of the element they had been paid to paint. As the symptoms advanced, severe bone pain, crumbling vertebrae, spontaneous fractures, and a gait so painful they could barely walk, the U.S. Radium Corporation dug in its heels. They employed doctors who, willingly or ignorantly, issued diagnoses of rheumatism, syphilis, or generalized poor health. The company's primary goal was to ensure the public never connected the glowing dials to the dying girls. The glow, once a source of pride, had become an internal, unstoppable, invisible executioner.